It's time for some sharp lessons. That's what it's time for. The Spear Beta feedback update is here, and here to talk to us about spears, it is Taylor Trigg Brooks, combat designer at ArenaNet. Of course, there was the beta event for all of the spears. During that, ArenaNet gathered up all the data. They read the forums, if you can believe it. Okay, they looked at what people had to say, and we've got some pretty cool updates, actually, in my opinion. Like, they've responded to some of the really common points of feedback, and I do think that these changes are actually going to make the experience a lot better, actually. And we'll go over this right now. Don't need to delay any longer, but I do think they've actually addressed a lot of the key feedback points here. So let's see what's going on. So first up is Elementalist. Spear-wielding Elementalists sought to harness the power of natural disasters to bring calamity to their enemies. It is the most visually ambitious weapon we have created. We couldn't be prouder of the art team's work. However, in the beta, the damage wasn't as impressive as the visuals were. Yeah, like, it was actually quite comical how low the damage was. And like you summon this mega giga volcano and it does like no damage. It's very funny. We agree with the feedback that the weapon's power level landed too low, and you can expect to see damage increases for all game modes, especially for the capstone etching skills. Very, very cool, actually. Alongside damage enhancements, we'll be making the following quality of life adjustments to the weapon. Etching durations will be increased by a few seconds. That's really nice. It was definitely tricky to actually get the full etch off, especially in the competitive modes, I feel like. While Ripple's distance is now controllable, this is the 3 skill on water, right? And that's actually a really good one because it was like force movement, and any kind of force movement was pretty damn awkward, to be honest. And that was something that was annoying in PvE to use as well. Just in general, like having more control is always good. Seethe and Energize will not affect auto attacks. That's the fire and air 3 skills. Seethe basically made like the next skill you use do more damage, and Energize give you a guaranteed crit on your next hit. These are big changes, not affecting auto attacks, by the way, because it was almost a bit awkward. You'd had to really chain into the next skill immediately, otherwise you just waste your kind of power move on your auto attack. So I think that's actually a really good thing as well. And the visual noise of etchings has been reduced. Well, it would have been nice to see an image of that, wouldn't it? But yeah, that's good to hear, seeing as it was pretty intense. I think they'll probably make them a bit more transparent, because I think kind of the issue with the etchings from the player perspective was that it was this massive kind of like black circle with the bright kind of elemental color on them, and that literally covered everything up. So they'll probably make them a bit more transparent, if I had to guess, or translucent. We'll see. We've also added a strike damage component to Fulgur. That is the air ability that does the little storm debuff on people, and rebalance some of its effectiveness away from the damage over time in PvE for a more immediate effect. We're hoping these changes result in a smoother experience with a greater impact. Yeah, they've hit a lot of the key issues here. I do think the weapon is still going to be a little bit rough in PvP in particular, I think. It's definitely very clearly a weapon designed with, basically Fire Wizard in mind, being a ranged damage dealer in PvE, and that's something that's less relevant, I feel like, in PvP, to be honest, because you've only got one weapon, right? You can't have this on your offset in Elementalist, for example. And in World versus World, that Staff already exists, so it's going to have to compete with that, but if the damage is really good, you can get like a massive volcano off, then maybe you can get some damage done there as well. The projectile nature doesn't help it as well, right? Like projectiles are a little bit rough, and Staff is really nice in World vs. World because a lot of its damage is from AoE fields, basically, like Meteor Shower, and of course, Lava Font and so on. Glyph of Storms, that kind of stuff. So, it is what it is, but certainly, look, yo, Ellie mains, I'm expecting this to be pretty insane in PvE on launch, by the way. I would not be surprised if this just, like, flat out cranks, like, 50k on launch. And you know what? I hope it does. I think it's fun to have some kind of busted stuff day one. It's not fun if you get your shiny new weapon and it does, like, no damage, right? That's not what we like to see. But, yeah. All right, Necromancer. This was one of the ones that I think was really good. Yeah, and that's where you see, like, comparatively, I felt like less changes here. Like, this one was just really good to use, I think. Necromancers aim to execute their foes with both spear and soul shards. With a gameplay loop of building and spending these soul shards, we saw that the shard economy was too dominated by isolate and distress. We're increasing soul shard generation outside of the 4th spear skill, and soul shard duration will now be refreshed when you gain more shards. With those changes and lowering the threshold needed to immobilize with Addle, we are hoping the weapon has more consistent power level and doesn't feel as weak when you miss Isolate. This is the big 4 skill, right? And to be honest, that is the key ability, right? It allows you to teleport to your target. It allows you to reset your 2 skill, right? And then you can go in Shroud and then kind of repeat that cycle. It definitely was that big power move. Like if you missed that, like you were definitely depowered for a while, especially in competitive. Additionally, Extirpate will now generate Life Force as well to help you follow up on its big hit. That is the 5 skill with that really interesting anti-boon effect in there as well. Yeah, this is actually a very hype weapon in my opinion. There's actually a couple of interesting power Harbinger builds out there right now, and that is exciting because this is a weapon that could definitely fit into a build like that, I think, actually. So we'll have to really keep an eye on that in PvP. And in PvE, I think this is going to end up being pretty good. It's going to fit fairly naturally into some of the power builds, I think, for Necromancer. And it's going to be interesting because there's a huge amount of sustain on this. Like, adding more soul shards in, like, you are going to be a lifesteal monster with this build in PvE, by the way. Like, you are going to heal a lot by doing this. So I think there's some really cool potential here. You know, you have some kind of like really aggressive, power build for open world or something like that. Boom, you got the Zakharos relic on there. You've got all the soul shards going. This is going to be a really interesting setup. And this weapon is really fun to use. I really like the combo style it has with like the 4 skill and the 2 skill. That recharge on the 2, then going into Shroud, resetting the 4 skill, and then repeating that process. It has a very fun playstyle, I think, actually. I'm excited for this in competitive as well. I think this will be a really cool weapon for kind of PvP modes and PvE, and just with numbers, it will be good. It already is pretty decent in PvE, actually. Like in the beta, it was all right. They probably like bumped the numbers up a little bit with this kind of stuff. Pretty damn cool, if you ask me. The Mesmer one as well. This is definitely one of the ones that, again, I think already had some. It was already really good. Definitely one of the better spears, I think, like in terms of how it feels to use. And what they've done here, I'm not entirely sure if I'm fully on board with this. I'll begrudgingly accept it, but they basically made it a little bit easier to use by the looks of this. The largest problem we got feedback on was the weapon's performance varied a lot depending on whether or not you had clarity. So clarity will now be gained. This was the ability you got with the 2 skill, right? When you hit them on the edge. If it has that, it's got like the donut, right? If you hit them with the outer edge, you got this special effect. Now you are gonna just straight up get that no matter what, right? You always get clarity, even if you hit, but you still get a guaranteed critical hit and more damage if you do actually land on the outer edge. So it's kind of like a bit of a usability thing. Like you can combo your abilities together. You don't get completely screwed over if you miss that. That's fair enough. Okay, sure. I do like that it still does more damage as well. And the guaranteed critical hit, I think there's actually some potential interesting options, I think, in PvP, actually. Because whenever I see guaranteed crit, I think Valkyrie Amulet, I think build that uses Daredevil Relic as a power build and kind of has the ability to guarantee critical strikes while still having that kind of additional tankiness. So I think there's some interesting builds that actually could come out of that potentially with that sort of thing, like using that guaranteed critical strike to get a lot of damage in that regard there as well. So yeah, clarity a little bit easier to get. I do like the Mind the Gap thing. And honestly, I think Mind the Gap is pretty easy to land. I messed around with the spear a fair bit, and I felt like it was pretty lenient, right? It was a fairly cozy thing to get away with that, but you're still going to have to do the little dance, actually, to get the extra damage in PvE too. Imaginary Inversion is also seeing a shift in how the skill functions. This is the 3 skill, like the kind of defensive ability that it has. Now, you always get the Comedy Cleanse. That's super nice, by the way, in PvP. Because Mesmer is actually a class. Damaged Mesmer builds do actually struggle a bit with Comedy Cleanse a lot of the time. So any extra cleanse attached to that is actually super cool, I think. It will also heal you if you evade an attack, even if you don't land the attack portion. So again, a bit more sustain just baked in for free. And if you have clarity, you heal even more to re-sustain there as well. Cool. The final large change to the weapon concerns, it's Phantasms. We saw in the beta that the Lancers routinely got outplayed by terrain, whether that was a cliff or a small pebble. The Lancers have taken a more vertical approach to their attack, and they will now jump in the air and launch a spear at their target instead. This will do damage in an area on impact, a much more reliable follow-up for the Mesmer. Yeah, I like the fact that they're making it AoE too, actually, because Mesmer does want an AoE weapon. And this is, Spear kind of was that. You had some good AoE, like the auto attack was cleaving, the 2 skill was also cleaving as well, the 5 skill is cleaving. And the fact that now the Phantasm is also going to have some big AoE in it. I think it's actually really exciting. That's exciting for all game modes, in my opinion, actually, because you can be blasting people in AoE in PvP with this, like cleaving a down state, for example, or just like, you know, blasting this into a team fight to get a lot of damage off. In PvE, super nice. Like having a power damage cleave weapon is amazing for open world. That's going to be amazing for a lot of instance content as well, where you want to have that AoE, like taking all these mobs down at the same time. Really cool, actually. I'm kind of a big fan of this. Like, there's going to be some power Mesmer builds with some serious AoE now, serious power damage AoE, which was a bit of a weakness, I think, for Mesmer overall, honestly, especially in PvE, in terms of power damage. Obviously, like, Virtuoso and Dagger has got some, like, decent cleave on it, but it's not quite the same thing as having, like, a lot of your baseline abilities being able to have, like, an AoE around you. Like, you can cleave in a line with Vert, but having, like, an AoE is definitely something a little bit different, I think, in that regard. So that's pretty good. I do like this change as well. That's a cool thematic RP. And yeah, if things are getting stuck, I mean, that's just not good, is it? Right? Like, you know, you don't want to have your Phantasm get stuck on a pebble. That's definitely not the way to go. So overall, I think these changes are actually pretty good. And again, in terms of damage, this is kind of already in a good spot. Like, Mesmer Spear was already pretty decent, actually, in PvE. It was tuned fairly appropriately. So I don't expect to see much tuning there. Again, overall, I'm expecting more damage on all of the weapons, I think, because they probably want them to be pretty busted on launch, or at least I hope so anyway. Spear, and we've got a big change here, actually. So, Thief's Spear endeavored to bring the skill chaining mechanic used by assassins in the original Guild Wars 2 into the modern game. We were pleased to see how it turned out, but we found that it could use some polish. We'll be changing a rule for how the skill chains progress. The chain will now always progress when you use a skill, instead of relying on hitting a target. So, this is actually a big quality of life change, and well, it makes it playable in PvP. So this weapon was semi-unplayable in PvP because guess what? People dodge your attacks, right? So you know, if you missed your chain, like if someone dodges or blocks or something, or, you know, evades in some way, unlucky. You know, your chain is gone and you're useless, pretty much. Like, your entire game plan doesn't work. So this is, in my mind, an effort to make it more usable in PvP. As a weapon, which I obviously approve of. I think it feels super bad when a weapon is kind of useless in any game mode, especially when that's like a key feature of your expansion. So they want to make this more of a thing in PvP as well. I think this will also end up just being a quality of life in PvE as well. This wasn't too much of a big deal because, you know, you often will land your attacks. But now if you do manage to miss in PvE, like maybe you go too far away, maybe you end up like backing off for some reason, and you just end up missing, you'll still get that attack chain. Kind of some interesting ideas here as well. This will allow you to kind of cycle through the chain when you're away from your target almost, which is kind of interesting. So there's also some little min-maxes, kind of little utility things that you can do there. Like when you're not directly in combat, you'll be able to prepare the skill that you actually want as well. And it will allow you to progress those chains away from targets as well. That's another thing that applies to all game modes. You're going to be able to have almost like a really good setup and use what the skills in whatever order you want as well. Pretty interesting, I think. But yeah. This aims to help the weapon feel smoother with a skill queuing system and enhance its reliability in comparative modes. The weapon ended strong in PvE, so there'll be some unsurprising downward adjustments. Yeah, it was like 60k DPS. That's probably a little bit too much. Its finishing skills and stealth skill will have their target cap raised to help the Thief's Spear identity as a cleaving weapon. Yeah, it's Connie cleave weapon, and I mean, that's a good thing in general. I mean, like, the more Thief builds that I think use these kind of AoE weapons, the better. There's some really strong Thief builds out there, but a lot of them do actually have this weakness of being a bit weird when it comes to cleave. If you, like, think at, like, some of the really good Thief builds, like the really high-power Thief builds, you're looking at kind of like the Deadeye DPS builds, Spectre as well. They have this weird lack of AoE. I mean, they have some AoE, obviously, but, it is a weird weakness. So having stuff like Spear in the mix, so you do have that kind of brings it more in line with a lot of the other things in PvE, I think, which is definitely the way to go. Definitely a good idea. I love a big two-handed cleave spear. It's good. Oh, yeah. Wait, hang on a minute. That's a very good call. Used by assassins in the original Guild Wars 2. Oh, no! Guys, Trig thinks assassins were in Guild Wars 2? This guy has no idea what he's talking about. That's actually a huge expose. But anyway, there you go. Yeah, good changes to that, I think. Ranger. Much like the Elementalist Spear, Ranger Spear had a strong narrative theming, but it didn't quite follow through fully into the game. Some of its skills, like its stealth skills and Bee's Sting, Bee Trig, lacked the damage needed to make it a competitive option against other Ranger weapons. Now, bear in mind, this was in PvP. In PvP, this weapon was absolutely busted, by the way. They're basically saying, we're going to make it really epic in PvE. Additionally, due to the popularity of traps and other pulsing damage skills, it was hard to weave in and out of stealth and complete your attack before you were revealed. To remedy this, Panther's Prowl will now grant Hunter's Prowess for a short duration. Hunter's Prowess will allow you to use your next stealth skill, even if you're revealed. Guys, it's over. Okay, there are two things that are very funny about this. One, this weapon is going to be monstrous in PvP, I think, unless it gets nerfed a lot, because you're going to have so much reliability on the stealth and so much reliability on your stealth abilities here, especially with this next change, by the way, with Panther's Prowl and Spider's Web, the 5 skill, not sharing a cooldown. So if you use the web, you don't burn a stealth charge. They have separate cooldowns now. Very fucking tasty, by the way. But more importantly, yeah, this is going to be a monster in PvP. I think it already was in the beta, and Ranger is good right now, right? There's loads of strong Ranger builds, like Untamed is good, like Soul Beast is good, Druid is good, and anything that, you know, that adding more stealth onto that, like more damage, more mobility, like, yeah, the Ranger is looking good. But also, I actually want to point something out here, which is extremely funny. Okay. I'm resisting the urge not to go so hard on this joke that it comes off wrong, but I love the fact that Ranger is basically getting an almost strictly better version of Thief's class mechanic, or at least the stealth mechanic. So not only do all of their weapons have a stealth attack, they also have an effect that guarantees that they get their stealth attack off, basically. Whereas this is like one of the kind of annoying pain points in Thief, in PvE, is that you get trolled by reveal all the time. And this change here, the popularity of traps and pulsing damage skills, this is kind of a PvE. This is a big PvE change here. They want you to be able to use these stealth attacks while you've got your ice trap down and all the other stuff that you've got going on with your pulsing damage, so you can guarantee you get your stealth attacks off. Is very funny to me that Ranger almost has like the better version of what Thief has now, but on one weapon based. Very funny to me. But in all seriousness, I think it will be interesting, actually, especially for PvE. Even if this was PvE only, like adding similar quality of life to Thief, I actually think would probably help it. Like, one of the reasons why Thief play rate is relatively low is kind of because of stuff like this, is that the class is a bit of a pain in the ass to play, because of reasons like this, is that you can get trolled very easily, especially on Deadeye. I think. So that could be pretty interesting there as well. But look, you know, ArenaNet, they're not beating the accusations that Ranger's their favorite class right now, you know. There's a lot of Ranger mains, guys, at ArenaNet, although I don't think that's even true. I think they're actually all Ellie mains, man. Like, CMC mains Ellie. I think Grouch mains Ellie as well. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm surprised Spear isn't like 50k billion DPS. But anyway, yeah, this is going to be a monster in PvP. And yeah, some really cool changes, actually. That, you know, I actually want to point out, by the way, that this is a change that you would only make if you actually understand how PvE works for Ranger. I actually want to point that out very specifically. The devs very often get accused of not understanding how their game works and, like, not looking at how people play it. This is a change that you would only make if you actually understood how, like, the PvE rotations work in Guild Wars 2. And I do want to point that out, because this is a change that very much shows that isn't the case, and the devs do actually know how the game works. And I definitely feel that way with the current balance team, actually. I think we're in safe hands with Trig and CMC, guys. Love to see that. Fantastic stuff. And yeah, I'm terrified, guys. I'm going to be eaten alive by a panther in PvP, but in PvE, I think this should also be pretty fun too. And some good changes. Like, this will be much more usable in PvE now, I think. As long as the numbers are good. But yeah. Engineer! I didn't like this one, honestly. I don't know. I'm sorry, I didn't like it. Maybe they can change my mind, but I was not a fan of the NG one. Engineer Spear surged onto the scene, finding a home mainly in condition-based builds in PvE, and it was good too, the numbers were good. It sported competitive numbers, but was still rough around the edges in places. Keeping track of who was focused and for how long wasn't an easy task, so we'll be adding a visual aura to your focused target. Okay, that seems good. We'll also be adding an effect to the player when they have a focused target, making it easy to determine. Oh yeah, looking at that tiny icon, fun. Like, it really does show you that we need some custom UI for this stuff, and, well, customizable UI in general. Like, looking at a tiny square is going to be a pain in the ass, but having an effect for it is nice. Some casting times are also a bit slow. They'll be sped up to help the weapon feel smooth. I mean, that's always good. Lastly, Devastator will see speed increases, a range increase, and a significant reduction in its aftercast. I think that there's a little bit of copium there, I think, with the aftercast stuff and the casting time. I think that aftercasts in particular can make a weapon feel really bad, and, you know, we've seen them kind of prune away aftercasts from a lot of weapons, especially the more egregious offenders on Guardian, for example, a lot of the time because they kind of aren't really that fun to interact with. That sounds like a positive change. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is one that I guess I need to get in there and actually play with it. I don't know. I don't find this one particularly interesting. Like, I feel like it looks cool, but for some reason I wasn't entirely sold on it, but okay. It is what it is. I guess we'll see what we get. I don't have many thoughts on this. I actually don't have many thoughts on this. Like, would I have wanted them to change it in a more fundamental way? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, it will do good damage. It will do good damage. How bad can it possibly be? Revenant. I think this is one of the ones that had a lot of negative feedback there, because for a number of reasons, I think it was, the energy costs were pretty high. I think it was only had one condition on it, so it's kind of bad in PvP. Damage on it was, I think, very mediocre in PvE as well, actually. It definitely was not great. It has some pretty slow cast times as well. And, well, yeah, here we go. It was aimed to be a heavy weapon that built up strength, culminating in powerful damage. In the beta, we saw this weight was unwieldy and its punches lacked impact. Casting times are being decreased across many skills, and we're increasing the condition variety of the skills. I mean, yeah, there you go. You know, I don't think that Rev Spear is fundamentally a bad idea. I think it's, you know, perfectly fine. You're building up these stacks. You're unleashing more and more damage. You're building up. But yeah, the really big problem here was no Condi variety, so the damage is pretty low, and it did take a long time and a huge energy investment to actually kind of ramp up to this as well. Crushing Abyss's maximum stacks has been reduced from 5 to 3, making the weapon reach its maximum potential a lot faster. Abyssal Blot will now pull immediately, helping the weapon set itself up better. The result of these changes is a more fluid weapon with more tools to secure its damage. I mean, this is the big line here, in my opinion. So only having Torment, like, is kind of like a non-starter, to be honest, in competitive modes. Like, there's too much cleanse. You can't only do one Condi. That's just not going to cut it anymore in the current state of the game, and also doesn't help in PvE as well, you know, to be honest. And yeah, casting time's going down as well. Like, some of these skills were really slow, actually, like, very, very slow. But they fixed it. Good job. And more condition variety is going to be good. I mean, this should help it. I'm going to be a little bit skeptical of this, to be honest, in competitive, because it is a weapon that has a lot of damage, and a lot of the time for Rev builds, you kind of want to have some defensive utility on your weapons. Like, Rev is a class that loves that. It loves weapons like Greatsword, for example, that has damage, but also has that block ability attached to it as well. So I think this might struggle a bit in competitive, but I mean, Condi Rev is kind of on the edge of things. It could potentially be good. It's one of those builds that can pop up and just dominate. And like, maybe if the metagame shifts a little bit, it can kind of creep in there. Like, maybe you end up running, I don't know, something like Mace Shield and then Spear or something like that. So you have that defensive utility there at the same time. But, I mean, this should end up being pretty good in PvE. It's kind of a weird weapon in PvE, though. It's more of like an AoE Condi weapon, right? Because you already have short bow for the range Condi weapon. And this spear is weird because it's only 600 range, right? So it's in a bit of a weird spot. It's kind of like this hybrid of like very short range and melee almost at the same time. So I'm curious where this one's actually going to end up. Gonna be curious where this one is actually gonna end up, to be honest. Yeah, that is true that Spear... yeah, Spear 3 wasn't evade, right? You evade back and drop your little mines down. So, I don't know, maybe it can be good. I don't know, I'm a little skeptical, but we'll see where this one's gonna end up, actually. it's going to have to compete with all the other, like, Rev Condi weapons in PvE. If the numbers are good, then obviously it's going to be good. And it is going to have, I think it will end up having some pretty decent AoE. Like, Shortbow does have AoE, obviously, on its attacks as a condition weapon. But, again, there's a big difference in having, like, a projectile that fires in a line and having an actual AoE. There's some difference in usability there that will be interesting, and having that big damage hit, like a lot of the damage is on this AoE, this 5-skill AoE, the big blot. That could potentially be powerful. They don't mention increasing the AoE size, because it's actually quite a small AoE, which is interesting to me. So we'll see if that's actually gone up as well, but maybe not. Maybe that's something that might happen a little bit later on. Who knows? In World versus World, I mean, we are kind of in a Condi meta right now, so maybe like some big condition variety, this could actually end up being good as well. Some kind of like Condi Rev build. There's actually a couple of Celestial Rev builds going around right now, but they don't really focus on damage that much. They're more like utility. There's like Celestial Renegade that, honestly, maybe could use this, end up using something like this, actually. Like right now, it's very focused on like removing boons and kind of CCing a little bit. It's like getting hits off. Like this could potentially fit into a build like that because, you know, it will have some power damage, it will have some condition damage. But we'll see. I think overall, good changes, I think, to the Rev Spear. Can't really make a prediction on where this one's going to end up, though. I mean, outside of PvE, they'll make the numbers good. It will probably be good in PvE. Guardian. Oh. Guardian Spear. My beloved. This was easily my favorite spear by far. So much fun to use in World versus World. Actually. Obviously, you know, not super amazing in PvE, but again, just make the numbers higher, guys. Come on, just make the numbers higher. Bit of a weird weapon for PvE. It's kind of this hybrid thing, right? Boon support DPS, which it doesn't really fit naturally into a lot of PvE builds, but they'll just make the DPS good, in my opinion. Guardian Spear shone brightly in World versus World, especially in large-scale fights. Spear's biggest pain point was how its second skill functioned. Pressing the key again to stop felt awkward and had a few bugs. Helio Rush is seeing an update similar to the Elementalist Ripple. It is now a ground target, and you will not stop when reaching the target. And you will stop. You will not stop. Yeah, you will stop when reaching the target location. Yeah, way better to use that. I hope they've kind of made the ramp up faster as well, because there was this kind of like weird acceleration period at the start. They didn't make this an evade. I thought they could have gone with making it an evade. That might have made it a bit OP, to be honest. So it's pretty fair they didn't go that direction, especially seeing as this ability has charges, right? You can do it a lot. You can do it twice in a row. That would have been maybe a little bit busted, especially on Guardian, to us. And Guardian is not typically a class that has that evasion, but it could have been nice maybe for PvP. But they probably didn't want to make Willbender even more of a terror than it already is. Like this was actually good in PvP too. It had some kind of like meme one-hit potential that you could do because it was kind of like multi-hitting people, especially in downstate. So we'll see where that's going, but I think a really nice quality of life change. That was definitely like the main issue that I had with it as well. It's also getting some more self-healing with just like, it probably heals itself on its auto attack. It probably heals itself more with Helio Rush, just a bit more sustain, and Solar Storm as well, self-healing there as well, which again, perfectly fits into World versus World. And Symbol of Luminance will now always apply resistance to allies once. So I think what this actually means is that you always get the first pulse of the resistance, and then after that, it will basically refresh. Because the way this ability works is it only applies resistance to people who don't have resistance. I think what they're doing now is you'll always get at least one tick, and then after that, it won't apply it again unless you lose that resistance. And again, I think that's very much to make sure this doesn't get out of control in World versus World with like perma resistance or anything crazy like that. That's kind of the goal here. But yeah, in general, this is going to be amazing in World versus World. It just is. It's incredibly good. Really good damage. Fits perfectly into the current meta build, actually, for Guardian as well. And I think it will probably end up working out in PvE because they'll just make the numbers good. I think it's going to be a DPS weapon. I don't see a huge amount of potential for this to be a support weapon, to be honest, because I don't think it has enough like boon access on it, unless they significantly increase the number of boons that this has and just like slap a bunch on in PvE. I don't see it competing with any of the heal firebrand weapons, for example, because the heal firebrand weapons are pretty good right now, like Staff and stuff like Mace Shield, Axe Shield. They're no slouches. It's tough to replace that with all the Aegis and kind of like the healing that Staff has. Gonna be a bit tricky. Like, I could see it maybe on the Staff, because, you know, it's got some might on it. It's got some healing on it. Right, so maybe you could fit it in there and go like Spear, Mace Shield, Spear, Axe Shield, and stuff like that. There's some potential there, I think. But, you know, we'll have to see, like, what the numbers look like, if they've added any more boons, all that kind of stuff, like some of the other toolkit updates there as well. But, yeah, in general, some very solid changes here, I think, actually. To the Guardian one definitely addresses, like, the really key issue with the Helio Rush as well. Very cool. Looking for... I missed that. I can't wait to get back to Spear and World as well, guys. Like, I like that one a lot. Warrior! So, this one got memed hard, okay? It was definitely the Spear that was, I think, the most underwhelming. So, let's see, let's see what we got here. Spear on Warrior was met with mixed reception. It was a strong option in PvP, but didn't stand out in other places. This is actually something that is worth noting, by the way. Spear went down really well with PvP players. And I think the PvP players really like the toolkit, right? The evade being attached to the burst skill has good damage options. It has some sustain options as well. All over that. It worked out really well. There's actually a number of builds that you could play it on. You could play it on Spellbreaker. You could play it on Berserker, actually, as well. And it was actually strong. It was. It was actually, this alongside Ranger were the two spears that I think actually worked out pretty damn well in PvP. It didn't stand out in other places. Its range threshold mechanic didn't garner a warm welcome. Warrior Spear will be updated and to feature a new mechanic. We want to, and this is exactly what we wanted, actually. I think that the Warrior mechanic was a bit lame. Definitely wasn't super exciting. So, we're going in a different direction. We want to emphasize the force Warrior is launching their spears with, but in a different way. Instead of effectiveness varying by distance, skills will now do more damage to the first target struck. Spear Swipe will get some updates to its functionality, such as a cooldown refund if you evade an attack with it. And the most important note is that the Spear Marshal has been sent back to Remedial Javelin School, as Spear Marshal's support has been improved and will now track the target better. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, guys. They kind of actually slammed all of the key issues here, no? So you've got this cool idea that the first target you hit with your spear throw is going to take more damage. So, like, you can throw it through people, and the first target's going to do more damage. And if you hit, you know, if you've got, like, a target in a group of enemies that you hit them with your spear, it's going to do more damage. I think that's actually a pretty cool mechanic. Very in line with the Warrior. It keeps it simple, doesn't make it overcomplicated, but you're definitely going to have some play with that. That's going to have some relevance to it, which I think is pretty cool. Having a cooldown refund is also a pretty good idea, I think. Like, that type of mechanic, I think, always feels simple but satisfying, like, for using that ability well. And yeah, the 5 skill was a bit scuffed, let's be honest. The tracking, it was very funny, right? Because I think on the stream where they showed the spears off, they said, don't worry, guys, it's going to track. It's no problem, guys, you know? And then it didn't quite work out that way. So now they've improved that, and it's going to track a little bit better. So honestly, love to see that. Yeah. And again, they're going to make the numbers bigger in PvE, guys. Wow, what a surprise. And this will probably end up being pretty good. I would like to see a change that... one issue with this is with Quickness Berserker, actually, is that you have to channel a relatively long ability to get that quickness uptime. And that kind of makes this weapon disproportionately bad for quickness application. So again, all the changes aren't shown here, guys, so they might have already done this. But I would like to see, in the same way that Decapitate, because you spam Decapitate so hard on Berserker, it has lower quickness application on Heat the Soul. I'd like to see the opposite, actually, for Spear. So you actually have more quickness duration. So that it actually ends up being like a really cool weapon for Quickness Berserker as well. You don't get punished for having to channel that longer burst skill too. That would be just like a minor pain point there. But in terms of the overall like high-level design, I think this is actually significantly improved. And I think it will continue to be a strong option in PvP. And yeah, like I think this will make it more fun to play around with, and they'll just make the damage higher in PvE. And again, don't underestimate, guys, how good ranged DPS is here. Like, even though the Warrior Spear, it doesn't like apply 17 boons or anything wild like that, ranged damage is very good. Being able to have a kind of like an alternate damage option, like a higher DPS option compared to, say, Virtuoso or Scourge, is going to be really good. Like, I think ArenaNet's goal with balance is going to make stuff like, oh, if you want to play like a safe ranged option, you whip out the Scourge, you whip out the Virtuoso. But if you need that extra damage, like for like stuff like challenging content, then boom, that is when you break out the Warrior. That is when you break out the Elementalist for that stuff. And by the way, guys, let me be clear about this. If we're living in a world where You know, we get some nerfs to Vert, a couple of nerfs to Warrior, because we can't make the numbers ridiculous. But in the universe where Warrior Spear and Ellie Spear do, let's say, 45k or more DPS from range, all of a sudden, those builds end up being really, really attractive, in my opinion, in some of the content that's typically dominated by Mesmers, right? Like, that content, you know, stuff like Ceres, for example, like Kaining Overlook, right? Like, that is where these builds will become more attractive. It is just, like, having... There simply are not that many ranged DPS builds that are good in Guild Wars 2, and in creating options for that can have lower utility. Like the Warrior Spear, it's very simple. It just does damage, right? It's not like Virtuoso that's like packed with extra value. If you have a simple build like that, then it can work out well, by the way. And also, Warrior is particularly spicy, by the way, because you can Defiant stance the Despairs, which is actually better than Distortion, by the way. So, yeah, by the way. If this actually ends up being good, it's going to be super good on some of these like really hard encounters. Like, don't... Defiant Stance is a sick-ass ability. I guess it's a little bit awkward on Berserker, because you kind of want the Berserker heal skill. But I don't know. Maybe they'll make the damage not scale with that would be another change they could do for Spellbreaker, is make the damage on the burst not scale with adrenaline level like Greatsword does right now, because otherwise it's going to be scuffed as hell on Spellbreaker, because you know, you only have access to level 1 bursts, right? But yeah. There you go. That's how it is. Pretty cool. Also, shout out to the ArenaNet devs here. There's a little tidbit here that I do find extremely funny. People actually did say that Spear sucks everywhere. I did see people say that Spear actually sucked in PvP on Warrior. I will admit something. I like it when the devs tell people that they are wrong. It does bother me. You know, I know some of these devs, and, you know, I have a lot of respect for the games development industry. Imagine being a game dev, guys. Imagine this, like you're making a video game, and how do people respond to it? They say you have no idea what you're talking about, you're a noob, and you're clueless. I actually think it's incredibly based when the devs actually turn around and say, well, actually, you don't know what you're talking about. You're wrong, okay? Frankly, that's a skill issue. I like that. Just want to quickly point that out as well. A little bonus meme, in my opinion, with this. But anyway, that is actually a very fun thing as well. I do like these changes. I'm not going to lie. I really like everything they've done here in terms of how they've done this. I think, the Mesmer stuff, I'm like, whatever. Okay, I think this one was already, honestly, pretty cooked already. I don't think it really needed that much more. It was already a really fun weapon to use in my mind. But anyway. Big fan of this stuff. I think they've been really receptive to feedback, and, you can really tell that the devs were paying attention to this stuff, and I think they really have actually identified very, very key pain points in my mind, actually, on all of these weapons, actually. Love to see it. And, of course, we get the full balance notes, guys. I guess I have to read those. Look, stay tuned, guys, for the official release notes, where I will read all of them to you. Wow. I bet you're excited for that. I don't know when I'm going to do that. You have to play the expansion first. We have to play the expansion first, then I'll read the notes to you, like, after I'm done playing the expansion. I don't know. But either way, I guess we can... I guess we're going to end up doing that as well. But anyway, that's it, guys. It is closing in. It's just, 13 days until Janthir Wilds. I think we are going to have some more news. On the Homestead stream, the devs did actually say there's going to be a bunch of news, actually, coming through, so definitely stay tuned for that. Like and subscribe so you can listen to all the news on this channel. If you just really hate reading and you go, wow, I wish that actually GuildWars2.com was an audiobook instead, then honestly, this is the channel for you. I will read it to you. I will try to tell you what it means as much as I possibly can. And that's it. That's going to do it, guys. Thanks so much for watching over there on YouTube. And big shout out to YouTube as well, guys. Actually, 329 people watching live. Yo, you guys are popping off over there. Hope to see you for the launch of the expansion when I do like an epic 24-hour stream, okay? All of that live, okay? It's going to be epic. But anyway, that's going to do it, guys. Let me know what you think about these changes. I do want to point out that not everything they changed here is noted. There will be more changes. But let me know what you think. Do you think they need to do some other things? Are you happy with this stuff? What did they miss out? Did they miss anything? Are you looking forward to getting destroyed by Rangers in PvP? I don't know. You guys tell me. But anyway, that's it, my friends. Thanks for watching. and I'll see you next time. Boom.